chapter 3, we're still talking about Solomon. Solomon's just been instated on the throne. He just cleaned house, righted a lot of the wrongs of his father's reign, at his father's request even here. And now we see where things are going, because at the very end of chapter 2, it said that God established his kingdom greatly. So let's see where that goes. 1 Kings chapter 3, first 2 verses. And Solomon made affinity with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and took Pharaoh's daughter, and brought her into the city of David, until he made an end of building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall of Jerusalem round about. Only the people sacrificed in high places, because there was no house built unto the name of the Lord until those days. So here we have the first mention of relations between Israel and Egypt since way back in the Exodus. And that's a pretty big deal. We learn in 1 Kings chapter 6, just 3 chapters away, it has been about 480 years since the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt. So there's been bad blood between these two nations for 480 years. And we know why. The Israelites left Egyptian bondage in the middle of the night, among the wailing of the Egyptians, who were all mourning the death of their firstborn sons. The Egyptians were throwing them gold, throwing them possessions, throwing them precious stones and clothing, doing everything they could, bribing them more or less to leave the city, to make haste, get out of Egypt, get out of their lives. Well, the Egyptians have passed along that distaste of the Israelites for 480 years, and the intentionally cultivated for 480 years when you're looking at the Israelites and the Egyptians. And Solomon broke it. Solomon went to the Egyptian Pharaoh in his wisdom, the wisdom he already possessed, mind you. He recognized that Egypt was a powerful neighbor. It was a nation that would be better to have as a friend than an enemy, so he sought to solidify those relationships and arranged for himself to take an Egyptian wife. And this is not the point at which Solomon's wives begin to derail him religiously. That happens. It doesn't happen now. At this point, Solomon would have taken his wife, indoctrinated her in Judaism. He would have brought her into the fold, into the pack, into the religion. We know that because he's early in his reign. He hasn't yet been corrupted. There is later no Egyptian deity mentioned when he is condemned in the Bible for building shrines to other gods. None of them are Egyptian. So she didn't have that kind of an influence on him. He influenced her. He married her. He brought her into the city of David, which the city of David is the eastern part of the hill of Zion, where the temple is later built, not yet. And eventually in chapter 7, we see that this Egyptian wife gets her own house right next to Solomon's house that he builds. And then verse 2, it says, only the people sacrificed in high places. That's saying things are good. Things were going good. He got himself an Egyptian wife. He got himself good relationship going with Egypt. But the people, that's when it says only, that's saying but the people sacrificed in high places. There's just one problem with that. The people are not supposed to be sacrificing to God all over the place. The Israelites. He hasn't built the temple yet. They have the tabernacle, but it's such a large nation. It has seen such prosperity under Solomon, has grown so much that without the centralized temple, the people are finding themselves erecting altars to God in the high places, in the places that they feel are more reverent, and making sacrifices on their own. But that's not how things are supposed to go. Deuteronomy chapter 12, but when ye go over Jordan and dwell in the land which the Lord your God giveth you to inherit, and when he giveth you rest from all your enemies round about, so that ye dwell in safety, then there shall be a place which the Lord your God shall choose to cause his name to dwell there. Thither shall ye bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your tithes, and the heave offering of your hand, and all your choice vows which ye vow unto the Lord. And ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God, ye and your sons and your daughters, and your manservants and your maidservants, and the Levite that is within your gates, for as much as he hath no part nor inheritance with you. Take heed to thyself that thou offer not thy burnt offerings in every place that thou seest, but in the place which the Lord shall choose in one of thy tribes. There thou shalt offer thy burnt offerings, and there thou shalt do all that I command thee. So they do have a designated place for these things, but the people aren't using it. It has not been a sticking point for David up to here, and now it's getting out of hand. So it doesn't get addressed immediately, but the author puts that fact in here. It serves as a foreshadowing of what Solomon is going to eventually do when he goes to God and he insists on building the temple, or asks God to build the temple, which David wanted to build the temple. You remember, but God said, no, there's too much blood on your hands. Some of it from battle, some of it intentional. So, the Uriah the Hittite, Bathsheba's husband. So he says, no, your hands have too much blood on them. You will not build my temple. I'll set you up as king, but your son is the one who's going to build my temple. So God has already deemed this so, and now they're talking about it. We're getting very near that time. Solomon is king, and there's recognition that the people are just sacrificing all willy-nilly all over the place. Verses 3 and 4. And Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and burned incense in high places. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. 1,000 burnt offerings did Solomon offer upon that altar. So verse 3 there says that Solomon loved the Lord, walked in his statutes. So again, we don't believe that Egyptian wife tainted him in any way. He was bringing her into the fold here. Everything's good. He's doing the right things, except, just like it uses the same phraseology there, only he sacrificed, and that's saying it's all good except. The only problem is he was doing the same thing the people were doing, and he was sacrificing in a less than ideal location. But despite the lack of a centralized location, Solomon was very sincere, very much wanted to please the Lord. In this one aspect of it, he was slightly off base, but he was still very sincere. And Solomon went to Gibeon, the Benjamite city, which the Gibeonites were the ones that went to, when the Israelites came into Canaan, the Gibeonites were the ones that pretended like they had traveled from afar off, and they showed up with worn sandals and stale bread and said, hey, make a pact with us, make a treaty with us, let's unite and have good relations. We're not your neighbors, we're from far off. And the Israelites could kind of tell something was going on, but they went ahead and made a treaty with them, and then like 3 days later they figured out, hey, wait, these are the Gibeonites, they're just from right over here, and they fooled us. So instead of wiping them out because they had made a solemn oath to the Lord that they would not do anything, they turned them into manual labor. They said, you will carry our water, you will hew our trees, you will do things like that. So he's gone to Gibeon, this Benjamite city, and at the altar there, Solomon offered up 1,000 burnt offerings to God. At one time, yes, but at one extended period of time.
Imagine 1,000 animals of any kind. Wow. The blood, the skins, that's a massive thing, 1,000 animals. Assuming a lot of them are sheep and oxen, that's a lot. I think sometimes read that and kind of brush over and don't realize what a huge thing that is.
Give me a second, I'll get into it. Now, to understand what's really going on right here, you have to read 2 Chronicles, the parallel passage to this. So 2 Chronicles 1, verses 1 through 7, it says, and Solomon the son of David was strengthened in his kingdom, and the Lord his God was with him and magnified him exceedingly. And then Solomon spake unto all Israel, to the captains of thousands and of hundreds, and to the judges, and to every governor in all Israel, the chief of the fathers. So Solomon and all the congregation with him went to the high place that was at Gibeon, for there was the tabernacle of the congregation of God, which Moses the servant of the Lord had made in the wilderness. But the ark of God had David brought up from Kirjath-jearim to the place which David had prepared for it, for he pitched a tent for it in Jerusalem. Moreover, the brazen altar, the Bezaleel the son of Uri, the son of Hur, had made he put before the tabernacle of the Lord, and Solomon and the congregation sought unto it. And Solomon went up thither to the brazen altar before the Lord, which was at the tabernacle of the congregation, and offered 1,000 burnt offerings upon it. In that night did God appear unto Solomon, and said unto him, Ask what I shall give you. So Solomon, at the outset of his reign, as we learn in 2 Chronicles here, called a meeting of all the officials in Israel. And either the meeting was to get a feel for what's going on in the kingdom, and Solomon ultimately looked at everybody and said, after hearing from all of you guys, we need God's blessing. It's all, we got too much going on. We need God's blessing to deal it all. We're going to go to Gibeon. We're going to make a whole bunch of sacrifices. Either that, or the meeting was to gather those people together with the specific intent of taking them all to the altar at Gibeon, so that they could hold a joint sacrifice to God, so that they all could begin his reign on the same page. Either way, you don't think he did it all alone. He gathered a whole bunch of people there together. The result of the meeting is a trip to Gibeon with 1,000 burnt offerings, and as Dad said, that's a lot. And you remember all the specifics in Leviticus about what to do with an animal when it's being offered as a burnt sacrifice. You're killing the animal, you're sprinkling the blood, you're draining the blood, you're anointing the horns of the altar, you're taking the fat of the organs, you're burning specific parts, you're giving some parts of it to the priest, then you're taking all the blood, you're dumping it in a specific place, you're taking the carcasses outside, you're burning them in a specific place. That's, aside from the smell and the logistics of bringing all of the animals in there, it's a lot of work. That would have been exhausting. We worked how many cows yesterday? 5, 8, 5 and 3 little ones, and we didn't even get all of them. One of them got loose, like went straight through an open gate, and we didn't do anything with them. So we worked 4 and 3 little ones, and that was an hour and a half. And they're big old animals, and they don't always cooperate. And didn't go get him. No, I'm sure he's out there. I'm sure the cow's fine. we had a little gate, and then a medium gate, and then a big gate at the pasture. So we were trying to corral them all together, give them shots and stuff.
The blood from 1,000 cows, that's what they were, would be over 1,000 gallons. No, I'm sorry, 10,000 gallons. And that's just the blood.
That's just the blood.
10,000 gallons. I mean, that's hard to deal with.
So you've got one priest working the cows. You've got one priest who's probably doing nothing but just carrying buckets of blood back and forth and dumping them out. And for 1,000 animals, it was an hour and a half for 5 with us. Not that we. I won't speak for the rest of us. Not that I have any idea what I'm doing. I'm no kind of cowman. All right? These are at least Levitical priests. They're no real strangers to it. But for 1,000 animals, that would have taken days to do. You're not working through the night. You're trying to do as much. You burn through as much daylight as you possibly can. Then you're taking a break, cleaning up. It's keeping them all in one place, cleaning the bathroom. Those things poop like crazy. I can tell you that just from working with 5 of them everywhere. And they kick. One of us got kicked, not me. And then on top of that, I bet those priests, after all of that was said and done, took the best bath they've ever had in their whole life. I don't know. And what was the result of all this sacrifice? Verses 5 through 9. In Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night. And God said, Ask what I shall give thee. And Solomon said, Thou hast showed unto thy servant David my father great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth and in righteousness and in uprightness of heart with thee, and thou hast kept for him his great kindness, that thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne as it is this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father, and I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad, for who is able to judge this thy so great a people? So after 1,000 sacrifices, that night God appears to Solomon in a dream. And that is special because it's direct communication, which I know is stating the obvious, but Solomon's father David never had that kind of communication. Never had direct communication in that way with God. David was guided along by Nathan, by Gad the seer. He had the prophets. He had a priest consulting Urim and Thummim for him, but he never interacted with God in such a direct way. Now God has seen fit to speak to Solomon without an intermediary. So even without a proper temple, it seems the sacrifices that were made to God were pleasing, and that God could see Solomon was taking the laws of God and his role as king of Israel very seriously. And God says to Solomon, ask what I shall give thee. A divine blank check. Now that's something I dare say God would not have offered if he were not offering it to someone that God knew would ask for something righteous. I don't think he would come down and ever offer me that, because who knows what I would come up with. However many sacrifices might be offered, I can't picture God entering the dreams of any modern president or any modern prime minister and making this statement. But Solomon, at this point in his reign, was completely devoted to God and to ruling God's people well. So what does Solomon ask for? He says, "O God, you are gracious to my father. He was a great man in his own right, but now you have made me king. And God, I'm green as grass. I am but a child. I don't know how to go out or to come in." And that's the common colloquial saying for that. I don't have any idea how to carry on in my proper duties for the station I found myself in. And you've put me in charge of your chosen people. This chosen people that numbers beyond measure, and I'm starting to think the task is more than I'm going to be able to manage on my own. So please, God, give me understanding, wisdom, and discernment to rule your people well. Verses 10 through 15. And the speech pleased the Lord, that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said unto him, because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for thyself long life, neither hast asked riches for thyself, nor hast asked the life of thine enemies. That's hard to do. Hast asked. But hast asked for thyself understanding to discern judgment. Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. And I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be any among the kings like unto thee all thy days. And if thou wilt walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days. And Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream, and he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered up burnt sacrifices, and offered peace offerings, and made a feast to all his servants. So Solomon, asking for wisdom, pleased God, to say the least. The man didn't ask for long life. He didn't ask for the lives of his enemies. He didn't ask for riches. He didn't ask for power. He asked nothing for himself. You get that? It's selfless. And yes, wishing to have great wisdom and understanding might be a little self-serving in our eyes, but Solomon didn't say, make me the smartest man in the world. He said, give me the tools to rule your people. And in his estimation, the tool best suited to that end would be wisdom and discernment. So the request itself is completely selfless. He wants to be able to rule God's people well. And the request, it pleased God so much that he looked at Solomon and he said, since your request was completely selfless and you didn't ask for any of the self-serving things that so many kings would have asked for, I'm going to grant your request. God made Solomon the wisest man up to that point that had ever lived, and the wisest man after that's ever going to come. And a lot of people, will seek to clarify this by adding what kind of wisdom and knowledge he possessed, because surely even Solomon had been surpassed by Einstein or Stephen Hawking or even the apostles who followed Christ. And I don't see it. Einstein and Hawking, they have specific theoretical knowledge. You're immensely knowledgeable in theoretical physics in their fields, but that's still a country mile from wisdom. There are plenty of stories out there about Einstein and how forgetful he is. There's rumors that he had trouble tying his shoes. The practical wisdom, and in his field he was amazing, but it wasn't everything. And when you talk about the apostles in this kind of light, they were completely unlearned men who had been given a special kind of divine knowledge, but even that had been given them directly by Christ. So Solomon goes on from this to write Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, which are two books with just an unfathomable depth of the way the world works, not only among people, but under the hand of God. And he deduced all of it from the Spirit of God working in Solomon's own experiences. So I have no problem saying that Solomon was the wisest human being that ever lived and that the world will ever see. And last Sunday's sermon was Proverbs. This coming Sunday, talking about graduation Sunday, guess what? We're in Proverbs. And 3,000 years ago, give or take, that was written, and it's still applicable today. Because the nature of man is such that when you really get to the core of it, it doesn't change. God goes on and he says, not only am I going to give you the wisdom that you have asked for because of how selfless it was, I'm going to give you all the things you didn't ask for too. I'm going to give you riches and honor such that there will not be any among the kings of your time, all of your days. So a lot of people will say he's rich and the richest man in the world. He's up there. I don't know if he's the richest man that ever will live at this point. But I mean, that's a wild inflation calculation. Yes, sir?
Did he explain his dream to his servants, or to his servant's perspective? Did he just wake up one day in a really good mood and just go straight to the Ark of the Covenant and tell them to have a feast?
He may have. We're not given that detail. I don't know. I would tell people. Guys, guess what? It'd be like,
why he didn't give it to you.
that's probably why y'all seen The Wizard of Oz? The scarecrow finally gets a brain. At the very end, he'll like, does he put on glasses? I can't remember. Anyway, he puts his head and he goes, how do you feel? It's like the square root of my isosceles triangle is equal to the divided sum of the squares of the other two sides. And they're like, oh, that's amazing. It's not an isosceles triangle. It's a right triangle. That's the Pythagorean theorem. Even when he's trying to be smart, he's still stupid. That's a side note. That's it. Yeah, well, so God's throwing in fame, God's throwing in fortune, and he says, Solomon, if you keep my statutes, if you walk in the ways of God, all your days, I'm going to make you the wisest man all of your days, and you're going to have a whole bunch of days if you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments. And after that, Solomon wakes up and he realizes it's a dream. It's a divine dream, but it's a dream, and he goes to Jerusalem and he stands before the Ark of the Covenant and he offers up even more burnt offerings, more or less, I don't know, but in thanks to God for what has happened, he offers up even more burnt offerings because they've still got plenty of animals. And then he has a feast for all of his servants here. Verses 16 through 22. This is what is famously called the judgment of Solomon. Then came there two women that were harlots unto the king and stood before him. And the one woman said, O my lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the third day after that I was delivered that this woman was delivered also. And we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, save we two in the house. And this woman's child died in the night because she overlaid it. And she rose at midnight and took my son from beside me while thine handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. And when I rose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I had considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son which I did bear. And the other woman said, Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son. And this said, No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. So like I said, this is the famous episode called the Judgment of Solomon. It's included as an example of the wisdom that God has bestowed on King Solomon. And a lot of people have heard of this, but they have no idea that it's from the Bible. They think it's a fable. They've seen it spoofed on kids' television. I've seen it spoofed on children's television. People see it today or hear it, and they think it's more like a fairy tale, like Hansel and Gretel or something like that. They have no idea that this actually happened. This is an account from the court of King Solomon. And verse 16, the beginning of that passage, it opens up with then. But again, the Israelites, they're not all about chronology. So they're not saying that they had the sacrifices, a feast, and then this happened. The next day they walked in. It's included by the author as an example of the wisdom that was divinely given to Solomon. It could have been days after, it could have been years after. They're really just concerned with giving the example and showing the reader just how wise Solomon is. And as the account goes, two harlots go to King Solomon to settle a dispute, and it is disputed whether they were actually harlots, or if that's a non-flattering translation of a word that can be used for innkeeper. Harlots didn't typically allow themselves to have children in those days, but it can't be ignored either that they're without husbands and they're living together, so that doesn't look right. So they probably were harlots as well. But either way, two women come to the king. They'd both been pregnant and living together at the same time, pretty close quarters. One gave birth. 3 days later, the other gives birth. And the one who gave birth first is relating all of this to the king. She's the one giving the story. And she says that after the second woman gave birth, she was apparently so exhausted by the ordeal that in the middle of the night she rolled over and she suffocated her own newborn child. And in the middle of the night, she woke up, realized what she had done, and she took that child and she swapped it out with the 3-day-old child and then went back to sleep. And the woman who gave birth first says, when I woke up the next morning and I went to feed my child, I saw it was dead. But after I got to looking at the child, I could tell it was not my 3-day-old child. That, even if they had similar features, a mother would recognize it wasn't hers. After 3 days of doing nothing but just staring at the child and taking care of it, you pick up on even the subtle differences there. Not to mention probably being a little cleaner, 3 days old, and the other one having been newborn last night. But this woman, in the middle of the night, swapped the children out. And in response to that, the woman who had accidentally killed her own child said, nope, it's the exact opposite of what that girl said. She's lying. So they're both there in front of the king, pointing the finger at each other. Verses 23 through 28. Then said the king, the one saith, This is my son that liveth, and thy son is the dead. And the other saith, Nay, but thy son is the dead, and my son is the living. And the king said, Bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, Divide the living child in two, and give half to the one, and half to the other. Then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son. And she said, O my lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it. Then the king answered and said, Give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof. And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment. So he starts out in verse 23. He gives a recap of the situation. He says, let me get this straight. Regardless of the living situation or the occupation of these two women, this one says it's her son, this one says it's hers. Do I have things right? Fine. Bring me a sword. And I'm sure he was a lot more stoic about it, probably very serious. I'm not making light of it, I promise. It seems the only fair thing here is to cut the child in two, and each of you get half. And obviously that's a fine solution if it's two kids arguing over a cookie or something like that. But you can't do that with a baby, right? The questions get harder as we go through the evening. That's not wisdom, that's killing a baby. That's callous decisiveness with no attention to fairness or practicality. That's an evil king. But then the woman who was truly the mother of the living child yells out and says, "Oh no, king, give it to her. If you're going to kill it, give it to her. Don't kill it," because the depths of her soul yearned for the child. And the false mother said, "Let it be as the king says, neither mine nor yours divide the child." And with that, King Solomon knew which was the true mother, because it was his design the whole time was to evoke that maternal instinct in the true mother and put the child's life in jeopardy so that one of them would yell out. And the story of Solomon's wisdom went out through the kingdom like wildfire, and people feared the king. And that is to say that they had a genuine, deep respect for the king and his divine wisdom, and they recognized it as being of God. It's a fun chapter, right? 1 Kings chapter 4. Now, like I said, this one is a little bit of an info dump, so you got to bear with me. I'm dividing it into two things, but it's a lot of names again, and so if my tongue swells halfway through this and a whole bunch of gibberish comes out, just nod your head and smile like it's a good Bible study. 1 Kings chapter 4, verses 1 through 19. Ho! Everybody okay? That's all right. You got popcorn, you got drinks, you're fine. So King Solomon was king over all Israel, and these were the princes which he had: Azariah the son of Zadok the priest, Elihoreph and Ahiah the sons of Shisha, scribes Jehoshaphat the son of Ahilud the recorder, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada was over the host, and Zadok and Abiathar were the priests, and Azariah the son of Nathan was over the officers, and Zabud the son of Nathan was principal officer and the king's friend. And Ahishar was over the household, and Adoniram the son of Abda was over the tribute. And Solomon had 12 officers over all Israel, which provided victuals for the king and his household. Each man his month in a year made provision. And these are their names: the son of Hur in Mount Ephraim, the son of Dechar in Machaz, and in Shalbim and Beth Shemesh, and Elambeth Hanan, the son of Hesed in Araboth. To him pertained Saka and all the land of Hepher, the son of Abinadab, and all the region of Dor, which had Taphath, the daughter of Solomon, to wife. Bana, the son of Ahilud, to him pertained Tanakh and Megiddo, and all Bethshean, which is by Zartana, beneath Jezreel, from Bethshean to Abel-Meholah, there we go, even unto the place that is beyond Jokneam. The son of Geber, in Ramoth-Gilead, to him pertained the towns of Jer, the son of Manasseh, which are in Gilead. To him also pertained the region of Argob, which is Bashan, 80 great cities with walls and brazen bars. Ahinadab, the son of Edo, had Mahanaim. Ahimaaz was in Naphtali. He also took Basmath, the daughter of Solomon, to wife. Bana, the son of Hushai, was in Asher and in Elath. Jehoshaphat, the son of Paruah, in Issachar. Shimei, the son of Elah, in Benjamin. Geber, the son of Uri, was in the country of Gilead, in the country of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and of Og, king of Bashan, and he was the only officer which was in the land. So this is a list of officers, servants, princes, the people that were ruling the land. This is the cabinet. Just like when a new president comes in, all of a sudden you've got a new Secretary of Interior, Secretary of Transportation, they all sorts of secretaries, all sorts of chief of staff, everything like that. That's what they're listing out right here. So again, it's kind of like an information dump. A lot of them are recognizable names. We know Benaiah. He was formerly the captain of the king's guard. He was promoted to the general after Joab was executed. We recognize the names of the priests, Zadok and Abiathar. Some of these people, like verses 11 and 15, where it says, the son of Abinadab in all region of Dor, which had Taphath, the daughter of Solomon, to wife. Verses 11 and 15 list two of Solomon's son-in-laws. So that's two guys that married into the royal family, and then he gave them jobs, and they get listed here too. So a little bit of an information dump. Yes, ma'am?
Is this at the beginning of his reign? Pretty close to the beginning?
Yeah, I would imagine.
So he was fairly old enough to have daughters that could be married.
Yes, yeah.
So
Yeah,
he
there-
wasn't like a young.
No, when he says I'm a child and I don't know how to go out or come in, that's him saying I'm completely new to this and I've never had anything near this. He's been living a sheltered life in the palace while his dad has been ruling the kingdom over and over. And all of his great attributes, was not the best father, as we've seen. So maybe he didn't have as heavy a hand in trying to transition Solomon into that station, even though he promised it to him. I don't know, that's speculation. Verses 20 through 34. Judah and Israel were many as the sand which is by the sea in multitude, eating and drinking and making merry. And Solomon reigned over all kingdoms from the river unto the land of the Philistines and unto the border of Egypt. They brought presents and served Solomon all the days of his life. And Solomon's provision for one day was 30 measures of fine flour and 60 measures of meal, 10 fat oxen and 20 oxen out of the pastures, and 100 sheep, besides harts and roebucks and fallow deer and fatted fowl. For he had dominion over all the region on this side the river, from Tifsa even to Azza, over all the kings on this side the river, and he had peace on all sides round about him. And Judah and Israel dwelt safely, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, from Dan even to Beersheba, all the days of Solomon. And Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots, and 12,000 horsemen. And those officers provided victual for King Solomon, and for all that came unto King Solomon's table, every man in his month they lacked nothing. Barley also and straw for the horses and dromedaries, that's camels, brought they unto the place where the officers were, every man according to his charge. And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding exceeding much, and largeness of heart, even as the sand that is on the seashore. And Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east country and all the wisdom of Egypt, for he was wiser than all men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman, and Chalcol, and Darda the sons of Mahol, and his fame was in all nations round about. And he spake 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. And he spake of the trees, from the cedar tree that is in Lebanon, even unto the hyssop that springeth out of the wall. He spake also of the beasts, and of fowl, and of creeping things, and of fishes. And there came of all people to hear the wisdom of Solomon, from all kings of the earth, which had heard of his wisdom. So, first off, under Solomon, Israel saw a prosperity that it had never seen before, ever. There was peace, people were happy, and not just peace and happiness, but genuinely good relationships. So not just neutral, but good relationships with the people around them. They were trading with them. There was open communication with the nations around them. There was no droughts. There was plenty. There was so much to go around that Solomon's daily provision for himself, his wives, his servants, his household, which probably around 15,000 people, given the measurements that they throw around here, was 30 measures of flour and 60 measures of meal, which estimates say would probably have yielded about 28,000 pounds of bread. That much bread, and then 30 oxen, 100 sheep, and a number of deer and fowl as they were in season. So everyone in Solomon's care was well fed. And God gave Solomon much wisdom, much understanding, and then it says largeness of heart, even as the sand that is on the seashore. And that doesn't mean that he was like overly affectionate, or he's a hugger. Largeness of heart is still a descriptor of the mind. It's not saying it's saying he had a comprehensive knowledge of many, many, many different subjects, and not just theory or politics too, but practical knowledge about living, about life, and about people that he poured into 3,000 proverbs, and knowledge of God that he put into over 1,000 psalms. And what is most interesting to me, though, verse 33, and he spake of trees, from the cedar tree that is in Lebanon, even unto the hyssop that springeth out of the wall. He spake also of beasts, and of fowl, and of creeping things, and of fishes. That's the most interesting to me, because that's not theoretical knowledge. That's not something that you can come about just sitting in your room and meditating on the truths of life. It's not like math. I've heard of math savants and geniuses who can sit in a room and they worked out calculus without ever having a math class or something, just scrawling on the walls of their cave or something like that. I suppose you can do something like that, but knowledge of the natural world has to be observed. That's like Darwin on the beagle. Y'all know Darwin. I've course, Darwin, famous for the origin of species, traveling around on the Beagle, looking at the Galapagos finches and drawing out pictures of their beaks and working out that, if the shape of the beak is like this, it's probably because they were eating this, and if it's like this, it's because they were eating this, and back and forth. That's something Darwin would have never known if he stayed home and never observed it. But here, Solomon has a knowledge of the natural world that exceeds anybody else on earth. And to me, that almost has to be a supernatural gift, because Solomon, like we just said, has grown up under King David in the palace. He hasn't been out traveling and documenting species and looking at plants and animals and living with the apes or studying the crocodiles or anything like that. But he has a wisdom of nature, a knowledge of nature that surpasses anybody else on earth. That's amazing to me, because it has to be observed or given. But that's not something that he could just sit around, on his rear writing in his journal and figure out. You can't tell me about crocodiles unless you've seen a documentary or seen some crocodiles or used to have a pet crocodile or something like that. You know crocodiles at that point, but you're not going to know them if you're just sitting in a room somewhere and never deal with them.
You don't think he
He
traveled?
could have.
Maybe.
But not that way.
Not to the point that he exceeded the level of wisdom and knowledge of anybody else on earth. They were coming to him. Instead of him traveling around, people were coming to him to ask him about the world. And he was giving them all the right answers. That's amazing. And maybe it's not supernatural. Maybe I'm reading it completely wrong, but it seems like all the arrows are pointing in that direction. His wisdom became famous throughout all the known world, and people from all parts of the world began to travel to meet Solomon, to stand in his court, to hear his deliberations, to see maybe he's going to threaten to cut a baby in half today. I don't know. And they get all excited and stand in court there. Listen to people come in and pose questions and petitions and try and see his wisdom firsthand. He was something to see. And we get into that even more and more as the chapters go on here, but that's, I can get out a little early tonight. That's not too bad. 2 chapters is all prepared.
So he was specific about the cedar tree that was in Lebanon.
The cedars of Lebanon, yep.
And then the hyssop that springeth out of the wall. Was there anything anywhere specific about that, or is it just because it?
Is that a fabled plant?
No, it's.
Hyssop is the plant that they would use in the sacrifices whenever they're doing a purification ritual.
Very lowly kind of plant.
Yeah, that was.
From the grand cedar down to the smallest hyssop, I think is what it's trying to say.
Anything else?
From the redwoods to the mushroom.
Yeah. I'd like to see the redwoods. What's the other big tree species? Sequoia. Yeah. That'd be cool. They need missionaries out there, don't they? Mission trip in the trees. There's got to be some hippies in a tree somewhere out there that need the
You
Lord.
could drive through one in California, right?
Washington, I'm sure the state of Washington can use some missionaries.
Oh, I'm going to wait for the Lord to call me to that one.
Let's get across.
Turn this off before I get in trouble.
Yeah.